Okay, so as Ron didn't even introduce me, so thank you. So I will introduce myself. I'm Sara Garavelli, and today I'm here. I'm one of the directors of the EOSC Association, and I'm also involved in EOSC Future, and today I'm chairing this panel. Thank you very much to the speakers for the very fizzy presentations, so this puts some good basis for the panel. I would like to introduce, before we start, the two extra panelists. Ilire Hasani-Mavriqi, from head of the RDM team in TU Graz and chair also of the management board of the Austrian EOSC mandated organization, and Daniel Bangert, who is the Ireland's National Open Research Coordinator. So thank you very much for being here today. Okay, so we have heard in this session some examples of implementation and non-implementation of EOSC. Thank you, Ari, for that. But we heard that in Germany and in the Netherlands, and maybe we can start hearing from Austria and Ireland. What's the current situation there? So maybe, Ilire, do you want to start?
Yes, thank you. So since the beginning of this year in Austria, we also have an open science policy, and also mainly the title, so it's an Austrian policy on open science and European open science cloud, which emphasizes the commitment of Austria in open science movement, but also in co-creation of open science cloud. Another highlight is that this policy is ratified from 3 ministries. So from the Ministry of Education, Science and Research, the Ministry of Digital Affairs, and the Ministry of Climate, Environment and Innovation, which also once again emphasizes the importance of open science on the national level. I would shortly just name the 4 fields of implementation that are outlined in this policy. So starting with the publishing of research data according to the FAIR principles. Then another field is involvement in European but also international processes with a focus on EOSC, for example. Then open access to the publications which are funded by the public funding, and open educational resources. Now the question is how to implement the policy, and there are already several mechanisms in place. I will just shortly outline 3 of them. For example, policies that come from our funders, and Austrian funding agency, as a main agency that funds basic research, has already an open access policy, which encourage all researchers to publish publications and research data. And they made data management plans mandatory since 2019. Another mechanism are research data management policies on the institutional level. So several Austrian universities have already research data management policies. At some of the institutions, we also adapt a model from the Netherlands, for example, from TU Delft, to have discipline-specific policies. And here we encourage, on an institutional level, our researchers to publish their research data based on the FAIR principles. And a third mechanism are current projects that are funded by the Ministry of Education, Science and Research. They started 2 years ago. These are collaborative projects that were funded by an open call called Social and Digital Transformation. And 9 out of 34 funded projects are related to open science, EOSC and FAIR principles. Then another question would be, how do we make sure that all these activities are also aligned, not only on a national but international level? In my opinion, we have an implementation vehicle, which is the EOSC mandated organization, and also the EOSC Support Office Austria, which deals with the operative part of the Austrian EOSC initiative, where we combine very well bottom-up but also top-down approaches. And with this, I hand over to you.
Yeah. Daniel, what's the situation in Ireland?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Sarah. And I think just a few general comments as well. In terms of what resonates at the national level for us from the conversations today, I think we've heard around places for dialogue and collaboration is one, the importance of trust, and building on best practice. So in the Irish context, much of the policy ambitions have been articulated, I guess, in a similar way as part of a holistic approach to open research. This is through our 2019 national framework on a transition to an open research environment that sets out objectives and also commits to the FAIR principles. So that gives us the broader context for implementation. This is reflected then in our institutional and funder policies. Just to, on the funders side, we have mandating of data management plans, for example. The Irish Health Research Board also provides access to tools and services for data management planning and allows and guides their grantees on costs associated with data stewardship. We've also identified some clear gaps. So where they are in place, policies could be better aligned at the national level. There's also a need to build our national capacity in the area of data stewardship. We see this as really key. And in terms of technical infrastructure, areas such as active data storage and sensitive data could be better supported through national level services. So the policy development has been driven through at a national level through a forum, a National Open Research Forum, which I've been coordinating. And since early last year, we've really been in a process of mapping the landscape, really understanding the strategic needs of the community and making sure our recommendations are informed by their needs, developed through consensus and identify practical ways forward. So this process of national working groups, over 90 members in total, has really brought us to this point now of having a national action plan for open research, and enabling fair research data and other outputs is one of 3 themes there. The other being open access to research publications and establishing a culture of open research, as we've heard. That's another important aspect. So that will be, we've just been in a public consultation phase on that. We're launching this prior to summer this year. And to sum up then, I guess we're taking this overall holistic approach. And the general aim here is to take coordinated actions to overcome fragmentation. I think this is common. We've heard that in other contexts. And also to avoid duplication wherever possible.
Okay, thank you. So it seems that in all your 4 countries, I mean, you made good progress in terms of implementation of fair data policies. What would you suggest to less mature countries? So what were the key enablers or the key steps that you made to go to reach where you are at the moment? Who wants to say something? York?
Maybe one key enabler is something which doesn't have to do anything with policies, and that's a bottom-up approach where you address the needs of research itself. If researchers, there's this saying from, I think it's Antoine de Saint-Exupéry, if you want someone to build a boat, then don't tell him what to do and get the woods, but rather make him love the sea. And same holds for research data and sharing of research data. If we are able to understand under which circumstances researchers just love to share their data, then the rest is easy. But if we mandate them with policies and laws, you have to do this, then it's probably a bit more difficult. So I think one of the key enablers is understanding what each individual scientific community has as a key problem, to work on that problem, to have a community discussion, and then let the community solve it. That is how we are trying to address it, by domain-specific consortia. Any
other views? Ruben.
Yeah, so maybe I add to this. I like this very much, by the way. So this structure of digital competence centers that we set up in the Netherlands, I think is really worked for the, and then in the combination of having them at the domain level, but also at the institutional level, to really get close to local scientists, but also to make sure that you bridge then between different disciplines, because you can dream within one domain, but if we all dream in different ways, then we will never get into anything interoperable. So we will also, I think, then have to try and make it easier for scientists to work with local infrastructure, to work with local constraints, which there always will be, specifics of local infrastructure. So this is, I think, a combination that we need to try and establish. And one more thing, if I may add, is the role of the funder also in trying to enable this process more than just by policy and regulations, more than by just requirements for research data management, but also to try and build them along the position that these communities have and the universities have. How far are they able actually to make this a reality? Help drive training and education. So that I think is really a multi-level activity then.
Thank you. Yeah.
I agree to all the points, and I guess as soon as you have success stories or use cases, it's really helpful to show scientific and community-based use cases to others that are not or that were not involved in the policy development process. And there are several reasons why, for example, different specific disciplines or research groups cannot move from common standards or from practices toward fair data. And I guess with really use cases that worked, you can encourage them to adopt, even if the policies are already in place.
Maybe, go ahead, Daniel, sorry.
I think it's partly to pick up on that point, meeting people where they are. So we talked about respecting differences. Yeah, what's the culture and what are the outputs, and also maybe using what you have to their full potential. Or enabling FAIR is a multi-step process here. So if you have a repository that's discipline specific, you might start with data sharing and deposit, but you need FAIR assessment. You need to build on that. And the community needs also evolve, so you need to be flexible and adapt and respond to how that takes place over time.
Okay, thank you. So as we have been speaking about mechanisms to enable the implementation of fair data policies, the EOSC Association can also be considered probably one of these mechanisms. So what I want to ask you is that, in your opinion, is there any support that the EOSC Association could provide to you, meaning your country, your initiative, your thematic community, or vice versa, what you could bring to the EOSC Association to progress this implementation of fair data policies? Who wants to go first? Yeah, please.
Yeah, I'm always happy to make a first statement. So, of course, what can we bring in and how can EOSC help? I think it's the same question from different ways, right? And the answer from my perspective is maybe simple. Help us linking on an international and European level what we are trying to link now on a national level. We have so many questions where the researchers tell me, why don't you try to solve this on a national level? We are researchers, we always think international. And I say, well, but I have national funding, so I have to start somewhere, right? But the thinking in research usually is at least European, in most cases international. So a lot of these issues, we can start somewhere on national level and we can build prototypes and we can develop ideas, but they all will fly only if we can connect them on an international level. And that is where I see EOSC. So learning today from different countries, what is their approach, for me is very valuable, because I think this is where we can start to build bridges between the countries. And that is the EOSC bridges. And I'd love to see more of them. Let's call it like this, because we are all working on AI infrastructures. We are all working on PIDs. We are all working on tools to make data more easily, to verify data more easily. However, we often do it on a national level. And that is sometimes language bound, but in most cases it's not even language bound. So it's bound to a specific research domain. And if we now link all these domains, and they are linked. So what we only need to do is to link the research infrastructure efforts also, because the research efforts are linked. And our task in EOSC will be to link the research infrastructure topics, to make it as simple as possible.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point, because I think that a lot of the issues cannot be solved at all in a national level. The problem, as you mentioned, is usually disciplinary. So there are some disciplines where the tradition for open science does not exist, or it's being developed, and that's why forcing your national scientists to do something which nobody in their field does is a little bit artificial, and they will resent to that. Then the question is that who should do this kind of international activities? And of course, the EOSC Association is a very important part of the European part of this. I'm just advocating my own organization as well, Research Data Alliance, for this purpose. But also meaning that in either case, I'm pretty sure, I haven't asked Ute, but I'm pretty sure that she's not either going to pay for the national scientists to take a part in this kind of exercise. And I can tell you that the Research Data Alliance does not have that budget. So then the question comes that who is going to pay for them to take a part, even if they are really interested about this. I think that they need some place for this thing. It might happen from the Commission, but I am also looking very much from the national funders to see that at least encourage this activity. Maybe identify the fields where this is really needed, and then try to push this activity so that they will take a part in these kind of working groups, either in the EOSC or in the RDA in the global level, to further these activities.
Yes.
Could I just focus once more on education and capacity building? I think this is one area where the EOSC, I think, could really be a hub to assemble all the best practices in education, material on verification and data stewardship, on interoperability, on the PIDs, all the stuff that we all indeed are busy with at national level. And it could also, I think, be a resource for reuse of such materials so that we don't reinvent wheels. So,
yeah. And if I'm correct, I think that education and capacity building is something that you are doing a lot in Austria, right? As part of the work of the mandated organization as well.
That is true. We have also a national initiative in implementation of data stewardship programs. And I'm also co-chairing a task force on data stewardship on the EOSC Association level. And we are really keen to make sure that all these activities are very well aligned and that we coordinate and we build up on the previous work, especially the work that has been done in the Netherlands. So we have colleagues represented also in the task force. So.
Yeah, Daniel?
Yeah, I totally agree with. And just a complementary piece to that, I think, if we're really aiming at the R in FAIR there as the ultimate goal, then we need that built into recognition and credit. So having that at EU level, and the Commission's work on reforming research assessment ties into that as well. That's really key.
Okay, thank you. So now I would like to open up the floor to the audience. I'm sure there are questions. Françoise.
Yes, it's a question to Ruben. I understand from what you said that capacity building is interesting you. But I had a question before you said that. Do you have enough staff with the appropriate expertise to feed, to staff the matrix of the system you are building up with the thematic aspects and the local aspects, so you need lots of people to do that. Yeah. And so do you have enough people, or you need to set up something to build the capacities? And from what you said afterwards, I understand you are interested in building capacity.
Yeah, so I see this at two levels. So of course, getting the right skills, but also getting enough of the right skills. So we're trying to make sure that organizations actually, and this is also part, I think, of the interoperability aspect here, train data stewards in similar manners, so that we also have some sort of a national curriculum, preferably even international curriculum, of data stewardship skill training, and from the national perspective, we will try to get a train-the-trainer system, in which we use the local digital competence centers to help train local people. So also to have a scaffolded approach to build that capacity gradually over time.
So this means you have enough people in the local capacity centers to train the community at large, or
Not
you
yet.
still need to train them
Absolutely.
first?
Yeah.
Okay, because we are trying to build a system which is not very different in France, with thematic capacities and data workshop, atelier de la donnée locally, and of course to bring people at the right level of expertise in the different aspects. We understand the thematic centers will be built on existing capacities, but locally there is eventually lots of work to do to bring people to the right level.
Yeah.
So I understand very well that it would be interesting to develop a common framework, although there are differences in the legal aspects locally in different countries, so this can be different. But I understand capacity building can be a common ground for everybody in a sense.
Great.
Jörg?
If I may make a comment in this direction as well. So one of the 4 sections I presented was education and training, and it goes exactly into this direction. So every individual consortium has a certain amount of money to train the trainer, and that is our multiplication idea into the various subdomains. Now what we are lacking is a service desk which brings together all these people. So having an industrial background, I'd say let's build a unique point of access for asking RDM questions, and have the community be part of that, so that each question has to be answered once, for example. That would be a tremendous effort and really cool. So maybe we join forces and build something like that.
Sounds good.
If you have a unique answer to the question, this is another story.
There is another question here, Francisca.
Yeah, Francisca de Jong, Claire and Eric. I really appreciated lots of the elements that were brought up in this panel discussion. It is as if we are listening to a repetition of earlier discussions, because we've all learned a lot in the past year. So I'm sort of happy to see insights maturing. But I also see that the discussion about the division of labor between what national initiatives or local initiatives on the one hand and European initiatives on the other hand can do, it's important that we understand that division of labor, but it also brings us back to the question that was brought up this morning about the alignment of the funding models that are going to be in place, or that need to be in place to make that all work out well. We all know this, but I don't think we can stop thinking about how the resourcing model, as it's sometimes called, for the European landscape should look in 5 years' time. If we want to have a new model in 5 years' time, we need to start working on that today. And there's one little element that I would like to add to this, and that is it has to do with the importance of the international or the European or the international perspective of researchers. Indeed, they don't collect the dynamics for their field next door. They would rather go to their colleagues elsewhere. And I think this also needs some model of organization and resourcing in terms of finances. And I think it's good to underline that the clusters in the current landscape are more than willing to play that role. We have hundreds maybe of research infrastructures of all kinds, but the clusters are the place where a lot of synergy can be organized. And the thing that is lacking right now is long-term funding for that collaboration. And it may not be big money that is needed there, but some support sustainability models for that kind of collaboration, once we have agreed that we appreciate the cluster model, would also be needed.
Thank you, Francisca. Any other questions? Michelle.
Thank you very much. I have a question maybe to the speakers, but also to EOSC Future. It relates to the EOSC interoperability framework. I mentioned the jigsaw puzzle this morning and the glue layer that EOSC is trying to bring across disciplines. Now I'm hearing initiatives at national level. I'm hearing that we are all working on the same things. So I'm really willing to hear that all these practices are not redundant and feed into this EOSC interoperability framework. So that's my question. Thank you.
Ron? Yes.
What we're doing in this interoperability framework is also make the connection. And one of the connections is with the EOSC Association task forces. There are these 13 task forces. They, to a large extent, deal with this interoperability framework. And there are people from the Future project are in each of these task forces. In addition, within the project, we have working groups that also deal with these issues. But as Ari showed, it can be a lot of paper. And I think we need to make the bridge, make the connection to what's happening in the countries, to take the best practices and make the connection.
Yeah, I'm also happy to take it. This is exactly what we need to ensure in the next step. So what we can do is to prepare the ground, because we have local funding on a national level, and that is where we can make a big step forward. And one example is maybe from chemistry. So our chemists are building electronic lab notebooks, for example, because they identified that this is the next big step for digitization in laboratory experiments. But of course, they do it in alignment with international efforts. So it's not something which is then only in German laboratories, but of course it's an infrastructure which is linked. And to make it truly working, we need this interoperability framework, because then it is linked to all kinds of different laboratory tools. So we need this linking effort. And this is just one example from one domain. What we are addressing with NFDI is all domains and all problems in all domains. And this is what we have to understand on the European level as well. It's this kind of thinking which I'm trying to promote. Identify the problem per domain, develop a solution, and link with other with people in the same domain from other countries, but also link interdisciplinary the different domains. So we are trying to link on multiple levels. And this is why I think we clearly need EOSC, because this, from my perspective, this is where the chemists from Germany and the chemists from Italy and France and so on, they come together on the research infrastructure level, they come together in the EOSC again. That is at least my picture as I draw it. There might be others.
Yeah, so this is, I think, exactly the dimension that Francisca adds to the equation. So really also the role for the international data infrastructures in communities to help align chemists, social scientists, to really come up with their interoperability framework. I think the EOSC should be the scaffold to actually make all these different interoperability frameworks then work in a similar way. And here I think that the FAIR principles help us tremendously, because they are guiding principles, but they also say at quite many levels what you have to think about. This, by the way, does not then go to the organizational level of the interoperability framework, maybe. So that's for my neighbor.
I will not touch this.
I think there is another comment or question, I don't know.
Yes, this is a comment on the EOSC interoperability framework, and I'm also involved in working in EOSC Future on the EOSC interoperability framework. It is also not that we want to invent new standards and guidelines. It is more to see which are the guidelines which we want to promote through EOSC. And all those guidelines being developed within the community or on the national level can be part of the EOSC interoperability framework, but we have to come to some consensus to see which of those guidelines are to be promoted through EOSC so that you can be promoted within other domains, so that you can increase the uptake of those standards and guidelines, so that you can support the interoperability framework. It's not about reinventing the new wheel or coming to new standards, but more selecting which ones are to be promoted.
Yeah, and I think that the fact that we are all in the same room answers Michel's question that we are working together, actually. So that's good. Okay, if there are no other questions from the audience, maybe I will go with another question, because so far you gave us a very clear overview of what's the current status of what's going on. But then if I ask you, what is the main goal that your country or your initiative would like to achieve in a year's time to advance the implementation of fair data policies, what would be your answer?
Okay, I can start. I think what we discussed today, and maybe it feels like we are doing redundant work, I think at some extent it is necessary on all levels, like institutional and national level. At the institutional level, you have to try it out. Of course, we make sure that we are learning from other national initiatives or from the work that is out there, but you have to reach out to your local researchers, and this you can do only as an institution. And then there is another step on the national level. So for Austria, I can just maybe summarize it in one sentence. We want to keep going what we started, so co-create all these continue to co-create all these processes that we started, and move maybe towards more shared services. So we have learned what works, what is not working, and just make sure that we improve the quality of our tools and services, and we are aligned on an international level.
Thank you. Daniel, do you want to go next?
Yeah, I think in Ireland we also see a diversity in terms of maturity across different organisations. So I think bringing that to more of a level playing field. Through the National Action Plan, we have resourcing committed by the Department of Further and Higher Education, Research, Innovation and Science. So that allows us to test and innovate and try a few things in the short term, see what scales or could be scaled up. And I think it's also that participation piece, the broader engagement and awareness we can get around this, and continuing to build on that is key. So seeing who's in the room, who's not there, and trying to involve as many as possible. So.
Thank you. Ari?
Yeah, I can talk from two perspectives. First of all, about the presentation. From the ENVRI point of view, I can definitely say that in the next couple of years, hopefully at least this framework of organizational policies will come more clear. And then also that a lot of the infrastructures will actually start to implement these ones in their own policies. And I am quite positive that this is going to happen. For the point of view of Research Data Alliance is that we will definitely want to engage the international community in these aspects and build this interoperability layer also in the international level. This means in practice in Europe is that RDA has to also, let's say, connect better with the existing and upcoming projects related to the EOSC and the interoperability, at least to make sure that our services are known to them and they might use them in this aspect. And this is also true for the member state experts, that they would be aware of that there is this kind of tool what you can actually use. And I think that this has not been used in the level what it could be used in this aspect.
Thank you. Ruben?
I think I already gave it away, but building the competences, that's really what we are going to do. So that will be key for our progress. And I think this is also the competency framework that, so it also related to the 3 roles of data stewards. Maybe there will be more roles, but this is also a level that I think we can easily exchange also at EOSC level. But definitely in the Netherlands, we'll focus on that.
Jörg, do you want to?
Yeah, thank you. So for us, one of the biggest challenges is, of course, integrating the last round of the missing up to 30 consortia, creating more sections. So I think 4 sections is a good start with common infrastructure, with ethical and legal aspects, with training and education, but it's not the end of the story. So this is where we are actively working on. And maybe we can answer Karel's question a bit more. We work on that. 2040 is by far too late to answer your question.
Okay, so because, I mean, nobody is managing the time, because I was the one managing the time, I think that I would like to ask you an extra question, if I am allowed. And I mean, you know that we are preparing the EOSC Symposium, and this year will be co-located with the second tripartite event. So it will be in November in Prague, so it will be another opportunity to gather the community together. So what are the topics that you think should be on the agenda of the symposium, or the discussions that you would like to see featured there? It's almost in a year time, in 6 months time. So what would you like to see there? Which kind of discussions do you think we should have at the symposium to make this progress together? Any ideas? Oh, that's also applied for the audience. So if anyone else has any other idea.
Maybe I can. I think researcher engagement, and this is a topic in several levels, but in my opinion, or what would be helpful for for Austrian EOSC initiative, we lack of materials, for example, how to reach out to our research community, how to explain in a simple and clear words what EOSC is and what EOSC will be in a couple of years, or what researchers can expect also from us. And we have to try to make use of this momentum and try to keep the motivation of the organizations that are already involved in EOSC.
Okay, so more clarity on the EOSC value proposition, but also instruments, easy to use instruments. Anyone else?
I'm thinking of, so in our NPOS program, we're trying to involve other societal stakeholders, so outside science. Maybe that actually is something that the EOSC should also do. So these would be holders of societal data. They could be hospitals. They could be industry. And I think that if we do not manage to find interoperability also with and actually transfer the way that we set up digital competence centers, for instance, in research organizations, to the way that a large company maybe could do the same. Let's put it the other way. If we would manage to get that message across and build such structures on both sides, then it's much more easy to collaborate. So that would be, I think, part of a topic.
Any other ideas? If not, Natalia. Wait a second.
Shout. It goes to internet. So.
Hello, I would like to see implementation of data spaces from other EU projects to see the similarities, commonalities, and where we can work together.
Okay, so I will. Jörg.
I very much support this idea. Just to give you one link, so we have created a national project called Fair Data Spaces, where we bring together our research perspective with the industrial perspective. So it actually aligns the two things. So we should really talk to industry, and we should talk about more data spaces. I think it would be strong points on the agenda.
Excellent. So I will make sure that this input is taken into account for the preparation of the symposium. I would like to thank very much our panelists, so they deserve an applause.